The tension in the chamber was thick. The hearing had barely begun when Texas Governor Greg Abbott, already red-faced and visibly frustrated, slammed his palm on the table. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. "Stay out of Texas." Abbott bellowed across the mic, pointing directly at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who had just questioned his latest immigration crackdown during the national televised oversight hearing. Gasps echoed in the room. Some staffers froze. Others exchanged stunned glances. Abbott wasn't just angry, he was rattled. Crockett, calm as ever, didn't flinch. She slowly removed her glasses, glanced around the room, and tilted her head. "Excuse me?" she asked with deadly poise. Abbott's aides shifted uncomfortably behind him, already sensing the storm about to come. "You don't represent our people. You don't belong in Texas politics. So don't show your face in our state again," Abbott growled, leaning closer to the mic, his voice trembling with fury. Crockett blinked once. Then smiled. And then she leaned in. "Governor," she said, "if you think your little tantrum is going to scare me off." The room braced itself. Jasmine Crockett's voice was steady, so calm it was unnerving. "Governor Abbott," she said, locking eyes with him, "if you think your little tantrum is going to scare me off, you clearly haven't been paying attention." She pushed her mic closer. "Let me make this plain, I was born in Texas. I serve Texas. And unlike you, I don't need to bully people to be heard." The chamber was dead silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. Abbott tried to interrupt, but she held up her hand. "You've spent years silencing the very communities that built that state from the ground up. You suppress votes. You criminalize compassion. And when someone finally calls you out," she paused for emphasis, "you scream like a man who's running out of time." The audience behind her murmured. Abbott's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "You told me to stay out of Texas," Crockett said, standing up slowly. "Let me tell you something, Governor. I am Texas. I'm the voice you tried to erase. And now." She leaned forward, her eyes sharp as steel. "I'm just getting started." Greg Abbott clenched his jaw. He tried to steady himself, but Crockett had already seized the room, and she wasn't letting go. "You're not angry because I'm wrong," she said, pacing slowly before the mic. "You're angry because I'm right, and because millions of Texans are watching and finally seeing through the noise." She turned back to face him directly. "Let's talk about what really scares you, Governor. It's not me. It's not my questions. It's the truth you've been running from, on immigration, on healthcare, on basic human rights." Abbott leaned toward his mic, voice shaking. "You're misrepresenting this entire issue." Crockett raised a single finger. "No, sir. What you've done is misgovern. You've treated Texans like political pawns and silenced voices that refuse to bow. But I'm not here to play by your rules. I'm here to rewrite them." A few gasps. A quiet clap from somewhere in the back. Then, Abbott tried a different tactic, mockery. "You come here, grandstanding on a national stage, and pretend to understand our border crisis?" Crockett didn't blink. "No. I do understand it. What I don't understand is why you keep using fear to fuel your fundraising." The room broke into stunned whispers. Abbott sat back in his chair, breathing hard. Crockett remained standing, unshaken, her voice unwavering. "I didn't come here for your permission, Governor. I came here with facts, and a fire you can't extinguish." Jasmine Crockett took a step closer to the table, her tone crisp and surgical. "Let's lay it out, since you're so eager for a public showdown." She held up a folder. "This is a breakdown of your administration's actions over the past 2 years, billions spent on Operation Lone Star, thousands of arrests with little to no due process, and a spike in human rights complaints that your office keeps dodging." Abbott shifted in his seat. "We're protecting Texas," he muttered defensively. Crockett didn't miss a beat. "From who? Desperate mothers seeking safety? Kids fleeing violence? Or are you just protecting your political image while real Texans suffer under your watch? The tension snapped like a stretched wire. Reporters were now scrambling to tweet her words in real time. I've walked the border towns. Talked to law enforcement. Spoken with families, your constituents, she continued. They're not asking for more walls. They're asking for healthcare, education, clean water, and dignity. Abbott looked like he wanted to respond, but he had no line ready. No attack left that wouldn't backfire. You don't get to decide who belongs in Texas, Crockett said, voice rising just slightly. Because Texas isn't yours to gatekeep. It belongs to the people, all of them. Not just the ones who vote your way. The gallery erupted into light applause before the gavel slammed. The chair warned, order in the room. But the message had already landed. Hard. Crockett took her seat slowly, eyes still fixed on Abbott. He wouldn't even look up. Governor Abbott stared at the polished wood of the desk in front of him, his hands clenched tightly together. For the first time in the hearing, he had no rebuttal. The cameras zoomed in, not on him, but on Jasmine Crockett, who sat back with a calm, almost surgical expression of quiet victory. The chair gavelled again. Let's proceed with decorum. But decorum had left the room the moment Abbott screamed, "Stay out of Texas." What followed had been a political dismantling, live, unfiltered, and unforgettable. Crockett glanced down at her notes, then folded them. No further questions, she said smoothly. The answers are already obvious. A few committee members glanced awkwardly toward Abbott, waiting for a response, any response, but he remained silent, jaw tight, staring ahead. One journalist whispered into his mic, Greg Abbott, known for dominating press rooms, is now visibly shaken, after being publicly dismantled by Representative Crockett. Another reporter's tweet was already viral. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the truth, and it hit like a hammer. The chair called the next witness. But no one was listening. Not really. All eyes were still on Abbott. And on the woman who just took back Texas with nothing but facts and fire. As the next witness began to speak, the room pretended to shift focus, but the energy hadn't left Jasmine Crockett. Staffers behind the scenes scrambled to adjust their talking points. Abbott's team huddled near the back, whispering furiously. He still hadn't spoken a word since Crockett's takedown. A reporter cornered a senior aide during the recess. Will the governor be issuing a response? The aide gave a forced smile. We're reviewing the record. Translation, they were rattled, and scrambling. Meanwhile, Crockett stepped into the hallway, greeted instantly by a flood of microphones. Congresswoman, do you feel your comments went too far? One reporter asked. She turned to him, calm and collected. Too far, she echoed. Governor Abbott told me to stay out of my own state because I asked him to justify using taxpayer money on political stunts. I gave him facts. If truth feels like an attack, that's not my problem, it's his. The reporters buzzed louder. Crockett continued. I don't scream to be heard. I speak to represent. And as long as people in Texas are struggling, I'll be right there, with a mic, a seat at the table, and a voice that doesn't shake when challenged. A woman nearby clapped quietly. Then another. Soon, a small crowd was applauding in the hallway of the Capitol. Inside the chamber, Abbott finally looked up. Only to see the nation turning toward the woman who had just burned through his silence. Inside a secured conference room away from cameras, Greg Abbott's inner circle was in damage control mode. She ambushed you, one aide said nervously. No, she outperformed him, another corrected. And the footage is everywhere. Abbott said nothing. He sat stiffly, jaw clenched, watching a replay of the hearing on a staffer's phone. Crockett's words echoed through the speaker like a final verdict. I am Texas, and I'm just getting started. He shut the phone off mid-sentence. Get me talking points. We respond in the press, tonight. But back in her office, Jasmine Crockett was 2 steps ahead. She was already recording a video for social media. No script. No teleprompter. Just her, a phone camera, and the truth. Today, the governor of Texas screamed at me on national television. Not because I was wrong, but because I dared to question his priorities, she began. He told me to stay out of Texas. I told him Texas isn't his playground, it's home to millions of people who deserve more than fear and headlines. The clip went live. Within 20 minutes, it had 1 million views. Then 2. Then 5. The hashtags trended globally, hashtag stay in Texas, hashtag Crockett clapback, hashtag Abbott meltdown in offices across the country. People watched the moment on loop, one woman standing her ground, while a governor unraveled under pressure. But this wasn't just a viral moment. It was a turning point. And both of them knew it. Morning headlines were brutal for Abbott. Crockett silences Abbott with one line, Texas governor loses cool, Representative Crockett brings receipts, who really represents Texas? On news panels across networks, political analysts dissected the exchange frame by frame. She remained poised. He cracked under pressure, one commentator said on a morning show. She didn't just win the moment, another added. She redefined the narrative. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's phone was blowing up, texts from supporters, lawmakers, and even some unlikely allies. A senator from across the aisle messaged, didn't agree with everything you said, but damn, you owned that room. Back home in Texas, constituents flooded her offices with emails and calls. Not all of them were supporters before, but many of them were now. At a community center in Dallas, a group of young women gathered around a laptop, watching her clip again. She didn't back down, one said, inspired. She didn't let him define her. In Austin, Abbott's communications team struggled to regain control. They issued a carefully worded press release blaming partisan grandstanding and media distortion. But the damage was done. When you scream, people might hear you. But when someone calmly dismantles you with the truth, they remember it forever. And across Texas, people were starting to realize, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just speaking. She was leading. Within 48 hours, Jasmine Crockett had gone from a respected voice in Congress, to a movement. Clips of her calm takedown were being translated, subtitled, and shared around the world. Activists called it, the masterclass in controlled power. Political influencers called it, the moment the game changed in Texas. But Crockett wasn't soaking in the praise. She was organizing. That Friday, she stood in front of a packed auditorium in Houston. An event that was supposed to be a modest town hall had turned into a media spectacle. Every seat filled. Cameras rolling. She stepped up to the mic, dressed simply but confidently, holding nothing but a folder. When someone in power tells you to stay out, she began, they're not trying to protect the people, they're trying to protect themselves from accountability. Thunderous applause erupted. I didn't come here to pick a fight. But I won't walk away from one either, not when Texans are struggling, and the man leading the state is more focused on headlines than healing. She paused. I'll say it again, I am Texas. Not the title. Not the office. The people. The pain. The progress. Outside, a line wrapped around the building. People who couldn't get in stood watching on live streams, cheering from sidewalks. And far away in the governor's mansion, Greg Abbott watched the footage in silence. His opponent hadn't just answered his outburst. She had weaponized it, turning one moment of rage into a statewide awakening. By Monday morning, the ripple had become a wave. News outlets were no longer asking if Jasmine Crockett had won the exchange, they were asking what her next move would be. Headlines now read, Crockett's rise signals new era in Texas politics, Abbott fades while Crockett leads, even late-night shows got in on the moment. One comedian joked, Abbott told her to stay out of Texas, and she moved into his head rent-free. The audience roared. But inside Capitol Hill, the shift wasn't just cultural. It was political. Committees began revisiting Abbott's policies. Several moderate lawmakers, many previously silent, started questioning the legality and cost of Operation Lone Star. Behind closed doors, donors called Abbott's office, worried. "You need to stabilize this," one warned. "She's building momentum. You're giving her fuel." Meanwhile, Crockett remained unshaken. She didn't attack Abbott personally. She didn't gloat. Instead, she doubled down on substance. She introduced a new resolution demanding financial transparency for all state-funded border initiatives. It wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. When reporters asked her what message she had for the governor now, she smiled. "No message," she said. "Just policy." And that silence, that calm refusal to stoop to theatrics, it spoke louder than any shout Abbott had delivered. Greg Abbott had screamed to silence her. But Jasmine Crockett had responded with strategy, truth, and now, real power. The governor's office released an official statement late Tuesday night. It was everything you'd expect, blaming political theater, dismissing the hearings as stunts, and doubling down on border enforcement. But it was too late. The narrative had already escaped them. Crockett's composure, her relentless focus on facts, and her refusal to play Abbott's game had resonated across political lines. Even some conservative commentators admitted, quietly, that she had handled herself like a stateswoman. And now, the ground was shifting beneath Abbott's feet. Polls began to reflect it. His approval rating dipped. Meanwhile, Crockett's name recognition surged in Texas, and beyond. At a press conference, a reporter asked her bluntly, "Are you planning to challenge Greg Abbott in the next gubernatorial race?" The room held its breath. Crockett smiled faintly. "Right now, I'm focused on doing my job. But let's just say, I'm not leaving Texas anytime soon." The crowd erupted in cheers. In that moment, it was clear, she didn't need to announce anything. The possibility was already shaking up the system. And back in Austin, Abbott finally admitted what he hadn't said out loud: he hadn't just lost a debate. He'd created his greatest political threat. Weeks passed, but the fire never faded. What began as a televised clash became a rallying cry across Texas. From college campuses in Austin to community centers in El Paso, people repeated her words like gospel: "I am Texas." Jasmine Crockett had tapped into something deeper than politics. She had reawakened a silenced voice in her state. One that had long been ignored, pushed aside, or shouted down. Abbott's team tried to recover. He launched interviews, campaign ads, even staged town halls. But everywhere he went, he was met with the same question: why are you afraid of her? Meanwhile, Crockett continued building, not just her platform, but a movement. She met with organizers, local leaders, and young voters who had never cared about politics until she made them feel seen. And then, one warm evening at a rally in Dallas, standing under a Texas flag, she finally said the words that shook the nation: "I never planned to run. I never planned to fight back this loud. But when someone tells you to stay out of your home, your truth, your people, what choice do you have?" She looked out at thousands of faces, glowing in the light of phone cameras. "So no, I'm not staying out of Texas. I'm running straight through it." The crowd erupted. At that moment, it was clear, this wasn't just the end of a feud, it was the beginning of a new political era. One where facts beat fury. Where poise crushed power. And where a woman who refused to be silenced would now speak for millions. Jasmine Crockett didn't just leave Greg Abbott speechless, she made sure the whole state finally found its voice.